Hi, and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. I have a head cold at the moment, so I'm producing mucus like a xenomorph. Allow for that, and we're going to get through this. What I've got for you this time is 10 movies that I reckon you should watch. Just random movies in random genres that I picked off the shelves that I thought, yes, the people will like these. And I just bit my tongue, not having a good day. So let's get started with them with one of the greats from 1938. Directed by Michael Curtiz and William Cayley. It's a classic. It's a swashbuckling movie. It stars a Tasmanian, The Adventures of Robin Hood, with Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland, Basil Rathbone, Claude Rains, Alan Hale, Eugene Pallett. One of the classics, fantastic score by Eric Wolfgang Korngold. Errol Flynn was never better than in this. One of the truly great swashbuckling movies. So if, like me, you're not feeling 100%, and you want to just sit back with something entertaining and fun, this is the one to put on. Now, this is a Warner Brothers release. It's just DVD. No 4K, no Blu-ray, nothing like that. It's got a few extras on it, but nothing really impressive. But you're going to have a great time just watching this one and enjoying defeating the bad guys and swinging around Sherwood Forest and having a great time shooting arrows, making love to beautiful women, all that kind of stuff. The Adventures of Robin Hood. I picked this one up for $6. New. So classic films, if you search around in various shops, you're going to find them at a good price as long as you don't want to go 4K. The Adventures of Robin Hood I love. It's got a high rewatchability. If you look carefully, you can see a scene where they're shooting in the Sherwood Forest, and in the bushes behind them you can see cars going past. I'll leave you to find that one for yourself. But I love this movie. Like I said, Tasmanian born star in this one. And when I was in Tasmania, I went on a stupid ghost tour. The one thing that impressed me on the ghost tour was they showed me the hospital where Errol Flynn was born. It's the only thing that impressed me all night, and I froze my ass off. But there you go. Check that one out. So we are hopping genres in this video, and I got this really impressive Umbrella Blu-ray release. It's a 2-disc collection with the 2 different versions of the Blob. It's got the 1958 version, the 1988 version, and also on the 1958 version disc, you get Son of the Blob, the pastiche that was done in the 1970s. So you get all 3 Blob movies in one box. This one's Region B, and it's a 2300 limited edition. I don't know if it's still available on the Umbrella website, but if you can locate a copy of this, it's as complete a lot of Blobs as you're ever going to get. I like the 1958 version better than I like the 1988 version because it's got a better theme song. The 1988 version is great. The Son of the Blob one is kind of fun too. It was directed by Larry Hagman, oddly enough. But this one's a nice triple set there. And if you can find this one anywhere, it's a worthwhile one to get. The Blob is a classic science fiction horror movie. And the 1988 remake is an honourable addition to the pantheon. Check that one out. You're going to have a good time.
What do we sing? Yeah, I know. We're singing a song about when the war's over. Yeah.
This one's going to be a bit hard to find, but I thought I'd mention it because it's a movie that nobody knows about from World War II that I love unashamedly and completely. It stars Elsie and Doris Waters, 2 women who did radio programs as Gert and Daisy, a couple of working class women with families just struggling through World War II in England. And they did a couple of movies, and this one, Gert and Daisy's Weekend, is just such a life-affirming, cool film. Basically, the Blitz is raging and Gert and Daisy volunteered to escort a bunch of evacuee children to the country and to look after them in the country. And it's fun. It's got really funny wordplay in it. It's got songs. It's got a spirit of persistence and just struggling through the shit that's going on around you. And it's a really life-affirming little film. And Gert and Daisy are wonderful characters. They don't take shit from authorities. They don't take shit from people who are up themselves. They're really working class heroes in the best possible sense of the word. And Elsie and Doris Waters were music hall entertainers who phased into playing Gert and Daisy when the war broke out. And they're just fantastic. They're funny, they're witty, they're wise, they're life-affirming. And it's one of those movies that remind you that what Gert and Daisy are going through is something that a lot of people across the world are still going through to this day. And if a little bit of Gert and Daisy's spirit can be transferred to those people, I think it would be a good thing in the world. But Gert and Daisy's Weekend, I love. I watch it every now and then. and reminds me that sometimes cinema is about entertainment and about imparting wisdom and imparting a spirit of resilience and showing that, yes, things can be horrible, but there's always that little bit of fun to be had. And there's always that little bit of compassion to give to others when it does. And I love this movie unashamedly. This one's a classic John Sturges movie. Western. And, I like Westerns as much as anybody. I was going to put in all of the renowned Westerns that Bud Bedinger did with Randolph Scott, but I thought I'd go with this one. Because John Sturges's Gunfight at the OK Corral turns Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp into almost demigod, mythological people. And the heroic nature of them, even though Doc Holliday's dying of tuberculosis and is more than a little bit of an asshole, and even though Wyatt Earp is having romantic problems of his own, it's got this mythic aspect to it and this larger-than-life aspect to it that's really interesting. Good supporting cast in this one as well. You got people like DeForest Kelly turning up, Dennis Hopper's in there as well, Rhonda Fleming, Joe Van Fleet, who's really good playing a love interest for Doc Holliday, John Ireland. Really a classic Western. And I know there's been a 4K release of this, but I've just got the American Blu-ray release, so I'm happy with that. And there's so many iconic scenes there. There's a really good scene where Burt Lancaster does a diving roll during the gunfight to get behind some cover. And that looks fantastic. And there's a bit where Kirk Douglas is throwing knives into the door of his hotel room. Just an iconic Western. And it plays into that sense of mythology about the Wild West that's always been a part of cinema right from the early 1900s. There's always been that mythologizing about the colonization process of the West. And Gunfight at the OK Corral is part of that. But if you just embrace and accept that, it's a bloody good entertainment. And John Sturges knew how to film widescreen. He used the frame of a widescreen cinemascope aspect ratio as well as anybody in his time. Other movies of his, like Bad Day at Black Rock, shows that he could shoot landscapes and shoot people in landscapes magnificently. And the Gunfight at the OK Corral I love. Dimitri Tiomkin's soundtrack is a banger too. I like other versions of this as well, Tombstone and things like that, the ones that are a bit more realistic. Hour of the Gun's another one. But this one I like for its mythic aspects and for its larger-than-life aspects. And the movie totally embraces that mythology about the Wild West. While we're on Westerns, we'll go with a slightly unusual one. A small-scale Universal Western from the 1950s. What year is it? 1959. Stars Eric Fleming, Catherine Crowley, and Michael Payton, another Australian actor. It's the first vampire Western, Curse of the Undead, which is really interesting. A guy called Drake Roby, played by Michael Payton, terrorizes a small town because he's a vampire. Eric Fleming, who was always a very stiff actor, plays a preacher who's trying to destroy him. Cowboys and vampires are a good mix, and this is the granddaddy of all of those. This is a Kino Lorber release, and I love the fact that Kino Lorber found and released this one as well. It's not going to have an enormous audience, but it's shot in wonderful black and white. I like the idea of going back to original sources of cowboy vampire movies. I mean, there are things like Near Dark, of course. Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark ran with the concept in a very interesting way. But as far back as 1959, even though it's not a perfect film, I like going back to the original source on this. And being somewhat parochial at times, I like the fact that Australian actors turn up in American movies sometimes. And Curse of the Undead is definitely one of those. And Michael Payton is really good as the undead gunslinger in this one. So you should check that out if you possibly can. This one I first had on VHS because I like it so much. Gotta love a Chow Yun-fat movie. And this is probably one of the best ones he did not do with John Woo. God of Gamblers. The original God of Gamblers. This is an 88 films release of it. If you haven't seen this, it is a weird movie because in it, Chow Yun-fat plays Duchenne, the god of gamblers, who is an unstoppable gambler. He can never lose. And there's some scenes at the start where you see how he never loses, never cheats, but he's got supernatural ability to sense things, which enable him to be a very successful gambler. And then he accidentally gets knocked off a cliff and loses his memory and becomes a childlike creature who is adopted by an urchin in Hong Kong and becomes a part of a small group of people. The urchin, played by Andy Lau, has around him. And then they find out that he can never lose at gambling. And they start to try to use him. Meanwhile, people are looking for the god of gamblers and are unable to find him. And things eventually resolve themselves. But it's one of the cool Chow Yun-Fat movies. And I like this edition as well because you get a booklet, and I like a booklet. You also get a poster in it, and you get the movie on Blu-ray as well. There are a whole bunch of sequels and demi-sequels to God of Gamblers. But for my money, just go with the OG, the original. You don't need to watch the secondary ones unless you're a bit of a completist with that kind of thing. But the original God of Gamblers from 88 films, I love. And when I first saw it on VHS, it blew my little mind. It's one of those Hong Kong movies that got a little bit of buzz, particularly on the radio. There were some community radio shows like Danger Lowbrow and Zero G that were touting movies like this. And I found it on VHS on an import. And when I got the chance to get it on Blu-ray, I jumped at it. Love this movie. You should check it out. Beautiful Hong Kong action film with the action being in and around gambling. I only got 4 more to struggle through because I am feeling quite unwell. Sorry about this. I apologize. Next one's got an odd providence because the version I've got here has a stupid title. The movie's been renamed and it was released, I think it may have gone into public domain, I'm not sure. But it was released in this version from Brentwood Home Video as a thing called Graveyard Tramps. But it's not Graveyard Tramps. It's got nothing to do with graveyards. It's got very little to do with tramps. What it actually is a Nicholas Meyer movie from the 1970s called Invasion of the B-Girls, starring William Smith. Victoria Vetri's in there as well. Anitra Ford's in there. And it's about a bunch of women who basically get mutated to become kind of like bees. It's a mad exploitation film from the 70s. It's got science fictional aspects. It's got a little bit of nudity in it, a little bit of raunchiness and raciness in it. First saw it in the cinema, in fact, when it first came out, because at the time I was looking for nudity in films. Even though I've only got that version of it, and I'm sure there have been Blu-ray versions and other versions since then, I'm going to watch it and enjoy it because I like the film. It's got that kind of lowish budget, sleazy 1970s vibe about it, which I like. And having William Smith not playing a villain, but playing a protagonist in the movie is kind of interesting as well. And the thing about the B-Girls is, if you sleep with them, you die of a heart attack. Something in, you got to say their secretions, gives men a heart attack when they make love to them. And there's this kind of venereal plague of deaths in a university town because these B-Girls are stooping people and killing them. I don't know why they call it Graveyard Tramps. The title doesn't give it any extra. Invasion of the B-Girls tells you exactly what the movie is. But I like this one, even though this is a dumb title and a dumb cover for it. I'm glad I got a copy of it. 1970s video trash. Gotta love it. Now, having done that one, I've got to balance the scales a little bit. So I've got a chick flick, and a chick flick from the late 1960s, directed by Mark Robson. This one was a big hit at the time, and it's a camp classic. The sexual politics in it, and the social politics in it, and the worldview in it is skewed to hell and is stupid as hell. Some will say the kind of sort of sequel to it's much better. But if you're in the mood for something campy and stupid and fun and silly, a big budget movie that really didn't know what it was doing. Valley of the Dolls. Barbara Parkin, Patty Duke, Sharon Tate, based on a novel by Jacqueline Suzanne. Totally over the top. Got a good supporting cast in it as well. Martin Miller's in it, Charles Drake, Alex Davion, Lee Grant, Joey Bissell, George Jessel, and Susan Hayward. And Susan Hayward gets some really interesting musical bits in this movie. In a role that was originally going to be played by Judy Garland, but Judy Garland was too fuddrucked at the time to complete her work on the film. But this one's basically about 3 women who find success by going to the big city. One is an actress, one is a singer, another person in publishing, and their lives go to hell, and men are bastards. But I like it. It's totally over the top and campy silly. I would double feature this with The Love Machine, another movie based on a Jacqueline Suzanne novel starring John Philip Law, which has got the most messed up sexual politics you could ever imagine in a film, seen from a modern point of view. But I like The Valley of the Dolls because it is just a camp classic. And if you're in the mood for that kind of thing, You got to just go for this ride and enjoy the pretentious campiness of it. Next one's a Spanish, Italian, French, and German co-production from the late 1960s, which stars Gary Lockwood, Elka Summer, Lee J. Cobb, Jack Palance, directed by Antonio Isarzi. Now remember, it's a Spanish, German, Italian, French co-production. They came to rob Las Vegas, which is a caper film. One of the other people who's in the film is Jean Sauvé, who played the Stefanois in the classic caper film Rafifi. And it's basically about a bunch of criminals who decide they're going to steal an armored car full of money while it's on its way across the desert to Las Vegas. And they find a very imaginative way to do it. It's a straight-up crime drama, but it's kind of interesting how they get the armored car and what they do with the armored car. It's got a lot of romance in it with Elka Summer, who was never more beautiful than she was in the 1960s. This one's a Warner Brothers release. I don't know whether it's got a Blu-ray release anywhere at the moment, but I like it. It's that weird thing where it's a European production, which purports to be in Las Vegas, and they did some second unit in Las Vegas, but a lot of it wasn't shot there. It wasn't shot in America. Yeah, I like 1960s and 1950s caper films. And this one's a little bit of an obscurity. When people mention caper films, they talk about Rafifi and Top Carpi and a whole bunch of others, including The Biggest Bundle of Them All, which is another cool one. But They Came to Rob Las Vegas I like because it's got a kind of toughness about it that's kind of cool and hip as well. And you should check that one out if you possibly get a chance to. This one may be out of print, but if you can find a copy of it, you're going to have a good time. You know what it is. It's a caper film. It's a pan-European co-production with American and European actors in it. Give it a go. Last one I got for you is an American film set in Europe. It's one of my top favorite films about Hollywood. And I was going to watch it late last year, but I never got around to. A lot of other things happened. But I watch it every couple of years, and I like it a lot. It's a kind of semi-sequel to The Bad and the Beautiful from 1952. Directed by the same guy, Vincente Minnelli, starring the same actor, Kirk Douglas. It's 1962's 2 Weeks in Another Town, which I love. I know that Scorsese talks highly about this movie. It's about the end of the Hollywood studio system and how a lot of creative people went to Europe to make movies in the 60s and how that seems to have diminished a lot of their work when there were up-and-comers in Europe who were making much better films. It's about a guy called Jack Andrews, played by Kirk Douglas, who was a famous actor but had a breakdown. He got a scar on his face. He went into a kind of rehab facility for a long time. And he gets an opportunity to work with an old friend of his, played by Edward G. Robinson, who's directing a movie in Rome at Cinecittà Studios. He goes there and he finds out that his toxic ex-wife, Carlotta, played by Sid Charisse, is there. And all of his ghosts come back to haunt him. And ultimately, though, it's about redemption. It's about dealing with your shit, as well as being about movies. It's shot beautifully. It's got a fantastic supporting cast. Claire Trevor's in there. Dalia Lavi. Rosanna Schifino, who was crazily beautiful. George Hamilton's in there, and even George Hamilton does a good role in this. But 2 Weeks in Another Town I love. And one of the things I did was, when I saw this movie, and I saw the really groovy Cinzano ashtray on a table on the Via Veneto where Edward G. Robinson and Kirk Douglas are sitting having a coffee. I found one on eBay and bought it. Exactly the same glass ashtray. I found it on eBay and bought it as a memento of this film. I love the redemption arc in it. I like the character. It works for me, and it's one of those great movies about Hollywood that isn't set in Hollywood. So that's what I got for you this time. 10 movie recommendations that aren't mainstream, that aren't about the substance or aren't about Nosferatu or anything like that. They're older movies, but they're highly entertaining and a lot of fun and well worth your while if, like me, you're sick as a dog and you just need to sit back and watch things. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you for putting up with my low energy levels while I'm ratchet. Usual things, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, let me know what you think of these movies. You can also support the channel by donating to it through YouTube, by becoming a YouTube member, or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/terrytalksmovies. Next up, I've got Science Fiction Saturday, and I've got some groovy stuff for that. So until then, I'm going to be self-medicating with all sorts of over-the-counter medications and hydrating and doing all the other things I'm supposed to do when I've got a head cold. By the way, it is not the spicy cough. I did a rat, and it's not a spicy cough. It's just a head cold. So please reassure yourself that I'm not going to flatline anytime soon. So until all of that happens and I don't flatline, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some old movies that are a bit obscure, but are highly entertaining. And I'll catch you next time.